Today, we are on essay number 9, which is Peace, Oneness with God by Jonathan Roof. And this Jonathan Roof is a devotee of Satya Sai Baba. So he's writing from that perspective. Now, when we look at the essay, there are various areas that he goes into. So the first section is peace at the level of the mind, and then peace beyond the mind. So first he goes into peace at the level of the mind. What is peace at the level of the mind? Peace at the level of the mind is virtuous action. What really gives us shanti at the level of the mind is when we do dharma. Many times, we disregard this and we are thinking, why do we feel so agitated? Why do we feel these emotions like regret, right? Guilt, disturbance, hurt, anger, why greed? Why do we feel such emotions? Why we feel such emotions is because we don't think properly. We are just born into this society where we just want to rush everything. We just want to rush and do this and do that and go from one thing to the other thing to the other thing to the other thing, that we fail to pause. And when our actions are a result of all of these going one to the other, one to the other, one to the other, what happens is those actions are haphazard and they're hasty. And whenever our actions are hasty and they're haphazard, there's always some bit of regret that we feel, some bit of guilt, some bit of, oh, I could have done better. There's always that sense there. And that brings us a great sense of dis-ease. So the first step to peace at the level of the mind is virtuous action, which means action starts from thought. So the first thing is to just think correctly. That's all. That's all. The one sadhana can change everything dramatically, just to think properly. Never mind if we're taking a little bit more time, but just think. Why are we doing this? What is the real purpose why we are doing it? How are we going to do it? How are we going to manage to do it? Is it something that's going to help everyone, or is it something that's going to just overwhelm everything, the whole system? Who should be involved? So just that moment of just thinking can make the action much more peaceful. But this is the part that we avoid. And so many times nowadays, we don't even like to read, right? We don't like to just read we don't read a whole email. Like, how many people do you know read a whole actual email? Many times it's just like, I'm done, right? We don't think. And then sometimes when we're looking at someone, we don't listen. We're on the phone or something and we're doing so many things at the same time. But we forget that listening is not only words, it's the silences in between. It's the tone. It's just that the way that something's being said. So if we want to achieve some kind of peace, then it comes from virtuous action. And if we want to achieve virtuous action, it comes from thinking properly. And what should the direction of my thought be? That which is of dharma, that which is of my duty at this point in time, which is dedicated to the higher. Does it tie in with everything? When my actions are well thought out, then you automatically feel a sense of peace. Nobody goes to bed with like a heavy heart or like a heavy sense of guilt. It's just peace, because that transaction was clean. And in fact, I had mentioned to you, Gurudev always says, meditation is something that's done 24/7, right? Because if my vyavahara, my transactional life is not clean, there's no way I can sit quietly. So first is virtuous action. And then the second one is the mastery of the senses. Now this one is very, very difficult. But with practice, it is achievable. First thing I should know is that in the present, I'm creating my past and I'm creating my future. How so? By this present action, whatever I'm speaking now, whatever I am doing now, this will become my past. And whatever the results of what I'm doing now, that will become my future. So really, everything in my life is made in the present, if you think deeply about it. Because this becomes my past and the results become my future. And if I become extremely focused on what's present, then I'm past future is taken care of. I don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to think about anything coming to you. It will come. I mentioned this to you also. We don't call for sorrow to come to our lives, no? We don't ever say, sorrow, sorrow, please come. But sorrow knows your address and my address, and it just comes. So you and I don't have to call joy. It will just come. Joy and sorrow are a natural result of our punya or papa, our merits and demerits. When we perform actions, it creates a result in the form of merits and demerits. And when those results fructify, they become joy and sorrow. So you and I don't have to crave or want anything. It will come. So when my mind is at present, it takes care of my past. It takes care of my future. Not only that, but when my mind can control my senses, that takes care of my peace of mind. When do I feel out, awkward, disgruntled, all over the place? When my senses just get taken away. They just get taken away completely. And we saw this in the Kathopanishad, that Ratha Kalpana, the chariot, isn't it? What is the thing of the chariot? Atma Rathinam Didhi. Think of this Jiva as the owner of the chariot. Shariram Ratham Evatu. And the body is the chariot. And the charioteer is the intellect. So you have the charioteer is the intellect. The body is the chariot. The reins are the mind. And the sense organs are the horses. Now you think about this. So when the intellect is holding on to the mind, and the mind is holding on to the senses, where is that chariot going to go? It's going to go in the right direction. It's going to go smoothly. It's going to go efficiently. It's going to go in the right direction. But when that charioteer lets go of its reins, what happens? The horses are all over the place, going wherever, and we never get to our destination. So mastery of the senses means collecting all of the senses and holding them with the reins through that intellect. The thing is, the senses have to be inspired by the intellect. And this is the power of the intellect, because senses will keep saying, through the mind, they'll keep saying, this is so boring. I don't want to do it. Why do I have to do it again and again and again? So many things will come in that mind, like, oh my goodness, all these things, and we'll make excuses. No, I just can't. I'll just say I'm sick. I'll do this. I'll do that. And so your intellect, my intellect, believe it or not, we have to have an amazing marketing department. where we actually creatively market spirituality for the mind. We actually have to say, you know what? It's really, really awesome. It's really good to do it. And just think of how many times you've benefited. Think of how many times you've been able to improve. And when your intellect creates this convincing key statement, your mind will listen. And if your mind is not listening, it's because that convincing key statement is just not powerful enough. You have to load it up. So for me now I'm doing this thing where I eat twice a day and I don't want to eat in between and I don't want any of that fuss. I don't want to think about food. And so it's been really, really helpful because I don't think about food unless I have to go into the kitchen. But once in a while, there's this like, I want to eat something. And it's not because I'm hungry. It's because I need to take a break. And so I have to like really powerfully tell my intellect, do you remember how good it feels to be in balance and how amazing it feels to have these gaps and how wonderful everything is if everything is in order? And it already has that marketing campaign. And most of the time, thankfully, it wins. So mastery of the senses entails that. Create some kind of gig for your intellect and be creative about it because you yourself have to listen to it, right? And when I'm able to do this, then I find peace. So peace at the level of the mind means this, being virtuous and mastery of the senses. Now, he also talks about peace beyond the level of the mind. And this is talking about our nature of peace. He says that the example of this tiger who got lost from its parent and now thinks that it's a goat. And this tiger thinks that it's a goat and it starts eating grass. It starts eating grass, and it starts to make sounds like the goat. And it forgets that it's a tiger until its parent comes and takes that tiger to a pool of water and shows the tiger, you are a tiger. What are you doing acting like a goat? And then when that tiger is shown, the tiger realizes that he's a tiger. So the most beautiful thing is, actually, you and I don't have to look for peace because we already are that. But what we have to do is remove the notions that we aren't peace. And when we studied Atma Bodha, you would have seen this example. Parichinna iva ajnanat. The self as though feels like it's limited, as though it's the body, the mind, the intellect feels like that. And once that notion of ignorance is destroyed, the self is free or realizes that it's free, just like a cloud covering the sun. That cloud is as though covering the sun, but we know that the cloud can never cover the sun. And once that cloud goes away, the sun shines in its own effulgence. So like that, when we are able to constantly remember the self, that we are already that, we are already peace. It's just these clouds of ignorance which we have to remove layer by layer by layer. And if you and I work on it, then we will be able to abide in that. That's really all that needs to be done. But that's a subtler practice because it involves going beyond the mind. It involves going to the layer of the self. So one is in the level of the mind, one is beyond the mind. Now, the next thing that he talks about is inner peace and outer peace. And what he says is, like all of the other spiritual traditions, that the world is really a reflection of who we are. And when we engage in a certain kind of practice, we can face the world even better. So he gives this example of wearing shoes. When we wear shoes and we walk out in the world, then those pebbles and rocks and the heat of the ground and the mud, etc., it doesn't touch us, it doesn't harm us because we've worn shoes and we can walk freely anywhere. We don't have to only say we're walking only in this space or we're walking only in that space. We can freely walk everywhere because we have that protective covering of the shoe. Our protective covering is that spiritual practice. You will see when you and I are grounded in our sadhana, when you and I do our daily sadhana, what happens? We can walk anywhere, we can do anything, and we are completely untouched. Because that layer of protection is so strong. But the days that the layer of protection is weak, we will feel every single thing. It's like walking barefoot. You'll feel every prick, every sharp object, the dirty mud. You'll feel the heat or the coolness of the ground. Every single thing will be felt because we forgot to put that layer of protective gear, which is our sadhana. And the deeper our sadhana is, the freer we can be to do anything. The less deep the sadhana is, the more I'll get pricked. So it's not a question of the roads are sloppy, the rocks are heavy, the road is very warm or hot. It's a question of how strong are my shoes. When my shoes are really strong, then it doesn't matter. So inner and outer peace is this, wearing that protective gear. That's peaceful protection. Then he also says, for inner and outer peace, what's needed is to stand apart. Sometimes you and I stand so close to something that we look at something and we think it's the end all and the be all. You know, have you ever looked at a painting and you saw only one part of the painting, but when you look back and you see the whole painting, you see how beautiful the painting really is. So sometimes in our lives, we talked about this in the context of finding faults in others. Don't take that part to be the whole. But now in our lives, sometimes we take the part to be the whole. And sometimes out of a moment of sadness, we think that our lives are so sad and dreary and low because we had a moment of sadness. And sometimes when we had a moment of a mistake we made, a great big mistake, we feel like our life needs to end because we made this big mistake and we feel so shameful. So sometimes we judge our lives by these moments, by these like small moments. We magnify them and we judge them. And similarly, what's going on now in this COVID crisis, we take that COVID and we magnify it and we say, look at what's happening to the world. Isn't it so sad and depressing? But the thing is, the mistake you and I are making is we're magnifying one moment. But we are not looking back at the movement. When you and I start to magnify one moment, we will feel all kinds of emotions, all highs and all lows. And we cannot stay balanced because we're magnifying a moment. But when you look back and you look at the whole movement of how things are happening, what you will see is harmony. What you will see is rhythm. And what you and I will see is actually growth. whether we look at it from our lives, we will see that there is growth happening. At some point in my life, there were downs, some point there were highs, some point there was criticism, some point there was praise, some point there was mistakes, some point there was something right. But you look at it and you will see that actually there's a rhythm to it. And in the same way, when you step back and you look at the movement of the world, some points the economy was booming and some points there was a recession. Some points everyone was in harmony, some points there was something like 9/11. So like that, whenever you and I just step back, that's all it takes. Just step back and just look at everything as a whole. And you will see the beautiful harmony in life. And that in itself creates peace. It creates that deep sense of understanding of peace. So inner and outer peace, one means that layer of protection. Another means standing apart. And another means, he says, is practice, practice, practice. In and through our day, how many of our thoughts are actually directed towards the higher? How many? If we want peace in our lives, the direction of our thoughts need to change to something more fulfilling. We call God. God doesn't always have to be that form of God, that formless God. God can be worship of that God, doing everything to worship that God. God can be the Guru Parampara. God can be the Ishtadevata. But how many thoughts in and throughout the day of my mind are directed towards something higher? It can be study of the scriptures. When my mind has cultivated that habit to cling on to higher thoughts, peace blossoms. But when I'm watching my thoughts and seeing how many of them are actually directed towards the lower, then I will feel a great sense of turbulence. So as a seeker, what do I need to do? Watch the direction of my thoughts. Which way are they going? For the most part. The most beautiful thing about our saints and sages is that they've reached a level where their mind is completely directed towards the higher, that you have to pull them back to the lower. Yeah. What a beautiful thing. Their mind is just reveling there. For us, sometimes it's the opposite. The mind is reveling in the lower, and we have to pull it to the higher. So peace is about practice. And that practice is nothing but the form of awareness of where is my mind going. That's it. And if I find my mind is going somewhere lower, if I find my mind is going somewhere in this world, inject some Bhagavan godliness in that. And put some godliness in it. Put some service twist. Put some peace twist. Put some generosity twist in it. Make it godly. The idea is, if we cannot bring our minds to God, wherever our hands are, make that godly. It will rise to God. Right? If we cannot think of wherever our hand is, just make it godly. Just make it a godly action. And making a godly action is so simple. It's just being in present. It's just making sure my intentions are good. It's thinking clearly. It's just these little things. If I cannot bring my mind there, just bring your mind here and convert that action. That's all. And in and through these things is how we can cultivate peace. So I'll just summarize so everything becomes clear in our minds. So the first part is about peace at the level of the mind and beyond the mind. So the first part, he talks about peace through virtuous action, which means thinking clearly. Because when I think clearly, then chances are that action will be virtuous or dharmic. And thinking a virtuous action, don't think a virtuous action is that which is praised. That equation should not be there, because different people have different stamps of approval. They have different vasanas. So some might praise, some might criticize, and that's life. Virtuous action means it was thought about well and it pleases Bhagavan. If you want to please someone, please God or please Guru. But don't think that virtuous action is equated to any stamp of approval. Second is, we saw that action wherein we are a master of our senses. And I have shared how to do that, to be at present, but also to create some wonderful marketing scheme for your intellect to speak to your mind that's convincing enough that can bring it into focus. Peace at the level beyond mind means knowing the self, which all of you already know. It's just a matter of going inward. Inner and outer peace, how to achieve? 3 ways. One is through protection, through our sadhana, our spiritual practice. The more protected we are by our sadhana, the freer you and I can roam into anything, anywhere without being affected. The second is to step back, not magnify the moment, but look at the movement, and you will feel a great sense of peace. And the third is practice in the form of awareness. So how many or how much of my thoughts are actually directed towards the higher? So in this way, he speaks about peace. Now,